organized by the Soviet players. So all the games ended with victories, with a triumph of Soviet preparation over Argentinians' plan to neutralize with a simple means like h6, g5, the entire line with f4. But that was not the end of the story. The effect of this victory, of this triple victory, was so huge that the line disappeared. And next time it was played, providing there were some other weak games that we didn't know, but next time it was played in another interzonal in 1958. And you can guess who took up the challenge and decided to prove that black is not yet lost. It was Bobby Fischer, a 15-year-old American, faced Svetozar Gligoric, and this position occurred to the surprise of many participants who believed that this line was buried once and forever 3 years ago in Gotemburgo. But Fischer made another move. So he just recognized that f7 square could be defended not only by the knight, but also by the rook. So now rook is not only protecting the square on f7, but also make sure that king has a potentially safe square on h8 or on g8. So bringing rook to the defense proved to be very effective. And in fact, Gligoric couldn't find anything better than queen g6, and after rook f7, queen takes h6, king g8, check, rook g7, queen takes h6, king h8. Gligoric recognized that initiative was already lost, and after bishop d7, knight d7, castle, knight e5, queen d5, bishop g4, black had no reason to complain. Eventually, game ended in a draw, and it was a new step forward. And the position after rook h7 was analyzed. Of course, the analysis was quite primitive, but white, after winning few games, actually was stuck in the position after castle, king g8, g6, rook g7, queen takes h6, bishop takes h4, rook f7. Again, it smells like king's gambit, not neither. Rook takes f7, g f7, king f7. And there were a number of games played in the 60s, even in the 70s. There were some new analysis of the late 80s, of late 90s, and the beginning of this 21st century. But it seems that white could force a perpetual, but there is no way to have an attack, successful attack, with two pieces down. One could mention that black at one point tried to avoid rook takes f7 line, playing queen f6, considering that after this queen sacrifice, it has two rook and two light pieces for the queen, and it could use strong square on e5 to bring all the pieces to the king side, and eventually, prove that rook and two pieces will be stronger than queen. But in fact, after rook f6, bishop takes f6, white found an amazing move, e5. The strength of this move that after bishop e5, bishop d3, pawn on g6 is protected. So that's why after knight f8, rook f1, knight bd7, queen h4, white created decisive threats in one of the games. And in the game Shabalov-Sadovakasov, black played knight c5. But after h4 and then h5, the pawn on g6 was protected. And of course, when queen left square h6, these two pawns created decisive threats to the opponent's king. So there is still some room for your creativity, and I'm sure that you can win even a game if your opponent is not well prepared. But normally, people who play h6, g5, they first look at this line, and they know how to avoid all the dangerous traps that white could prepare if it's ready to sacrifice two pieces in the opening. Well, as it happens quite often, the solution was more primitive. Black was able, thanks to Fischer, to neutralize knight takes e6, to neutralize this dangerous sacrifice. But after white recognized that it was not winning, it looked for more positional ways to refute black's risky plan. And it came up with queen h5. Queen h5 threatening now to take on e6. This square is weak, as usual, we know. And after knight e5, bishop g3, bishop takes g5. White has number of options. One is to play bishop e2, and after queen b6, bishop takes e5, d5, knight f3, queen b2, knight d1, queen d4 check. So taking on e1 is not an option, because then f7 square is again a decisive battleground where black defense is being crushed. So queen d4 check, c3, queen e7, castle, and then knight f2, knight goes on g4, and for one pawn, white has more than enough compensation. But even more acute is knight f3 instead of bishop e2, immediately attacking the stronghold on e5. And after, say, knight bd7, knight takes g5, queen d1, there is no compensation for two bishops and weakness on d6, and white simply develops his pieces, keeping strong initiative. So h6 g5 was not a solution. It hasn't solved the mystery of the main line of Najdorf with bishop g5, but as it happens often, the refutation, or quote-unquote refutation, because black definitely could get some playable positions after a g5, relatively playable. The refutation was a simple positional move, queen h5. But the story of this disaster, of this tragedy, of the collapse, temporary collapse of the Gotemburgo variation, it's quite a telling one, because that's what happens when your opponent is one step ahead of you in these sharp, complicated lines. So try to be one step ahead on your own.